Folks, Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer just went on national TV bragging that he has put hundreds of progressive judges on the bench and said he's proud they are ruling against Trump time after time. If you actually care about truth, sanity, and reality, it is time to become a Daily Wire Plus member. Winning the election, it turns out, was not enough. The fight for our values continues every single day. That's why we need you to become a Daily Wire Plus member. You get my show ad-free, plus exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. Stream all our top-rated hosts on desktop, mobile, and TV. Join the fight today at dailywire.com/subscribe. Well, speaking of the left-wing assault on basic human values, the assault on Elon Musk's Tesla continues. Now, I will say, it's pretty incredible what we're watching right now. There have been, across American history, a number of very large industrialists, bankers, innovators who have worked hand in glove with the American government when called upon to do so. In the early 20th century, there were bankers who worked with the federal government in order to essentially bail the United States government out of serious debt problems. During World War II, obviously, industrialists worked with the FDR administration in order to rev up the American war machine. Nothing about what Elon Musk is doing is particularly unprecedented. What is unprecedented is the idea that it's good for the country if his company is taken down. The hatred of President Trump is so strong, and President Trump has been so invulnerable to that hatred, that pretty much all the hatred of the left has now turned to Musk. It's kind of a fascinating thing. When you talk to people on the left right now, sure, they hate Trump, but they're kind of tired of hating Trump. They got bored with it. The fact is that they hated Trump 10 years ago. They hate Trump today. Elon Musk is the new hot thing to hate. And because Elon Musk has dedicated himself to Doge, to the Department of Governmental Efficiency, because he is going through department by department and looking for possible waste, fraud, and abuse, because he's so voluble on X, because he's so rich, specifically because of all that, he has become persona non grata, enemy number one. And that means that the left is now excusing actual acts of violence against, for example, Tesla dealerships. There are entire sites that have been set up to dox Tesla owners, according to the UK Independent. As protests against Doge head Elon Musk spread across the country, a website called DogeQuest has reportedly published the personal details of Tesla owners, leading to concerns about privacy and safety. The site reveals the names, addresses, and phone numbers of Tesla owners on an interactive map and uses an image of a Molotov cocktail as a cursor. The operators of the site have said that they will only remove the information of Tesla owners who prove they've sold their cars, according to 404 Media, which is full-scale insane. There are legitimately hundreds of thousands of people who own Teslas. The new site comes amid a number of attacks on Tesla properties, such as arson at showrooms and service centers, seemingly in protest of Musk and his role in the administration of President Trump. That map also includes locations of Tesla dealerships and superchargers. So I'm old enough to remember when Sarah Palin was blamed for putting up a map of targeted districts that she was hoping Republicans could flip. And then a nut job who had nothing to do with that map went and shot Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. And Sarah Palin was blamed for that. Here you have people who are putting up an actual map with the icon of a Molotov cocktail, and individual private people who own Teslas. And somehow this isn't a national scandal in any way. It should be. It should be. I mean, this is incitement to violence, certainly. The site says DogeQuest is the ultimate hub for enthusiasts of the Department of Government Efficiency. Our innovative platform allows users to explore an interactive map of Doge landmarks. Leveraging our cutting-edge artificial intelligence algorithms, DogeQuest goes a step further by connecting like-minded Tesla owners with one another, facilitating a vibrant community through shared contact information. So obviously it's cynical and ironical. All of this comes after a bunch of high-profile attacks on Tesla vehicles, including setting Tesla vehicles on fire at a Las Vegas dealership. The vandalism against Tesla has absolutely surged, not just in the United States, but apparently also in Canada. According to the New York Times, people in Canada have done real damage to vehicles at Tesla dealerships in Canada. More than 80 Teslas had their tires punctured and bodies scratched at a lot in Hamilton, Ontario, police said on Thursday. Several acts of vandalism against Tesla property have also been committed in the United States. Apparently all in retaliation for President Trump being mean to the Canadians and Elon Musk being friendly with President Trump. I mean, it has not exactly been sort of top of mind for Musk what is going on with the Canadians and the tariff war. That's really outside his purview. Meanwhile, again, the left is celebrating this sort of stuff. The Daily Show audience literally cheered Teslas being burned. This is on Jordan Klepper's Daily Show.
Tonight, the FBI and ATF now investigating multiple cases of possible arson targeting Teslas and Cybertrucks.
This dramatic video shows multiple cars in flames. Police say the attacker used Molotov cocktails. It's the latest in more than a dozen instances of arson and vandalism targeting Tesla.
The same suspect shot more Teslas with a gun. Tesla Cybertrucks were set on fire in Kansas City, and earlier this month, shots fired at a Tesla dealership in Oregon. Cybertrucks on fire in Seattle.
Wow, you guys like petty acts of domestic terrorism, huh?
And the audience is cheering. They're cheering. Now, I'd like you to imagine for just a second that there is a company associated with the Biden administration wherein right-wingers literally went to the factories where that company manufactured its product and started burning up the factories. And not the kind of stuff where you buy Bud Light and then you break a Bud Light to demonstrate you don't like Bud Light. What we are talking about, people vandalizing other people's property, burning cars. And this stuff is really ugly. And of course, it shades over into violence because many of the same people cheering this are also cheering the murderer, the alleged murderer, Luigi Mangione, who's the person who shot the head of United Healthcare. The escalation of rage against the right into actual acts of violence is truly astonishing and also predictable. And it's being fomented by some of the most voluble people in American culture, including, of course, the schmuck Bill Burr, who used to be interesting, used to be funny, and then decided that he was going to go full woke. And he's angry at me for saying that. But that's your fault, Bill. It's not mine. You're the one who decided to make the call that you were going to become Michael Moore with less hair. So here is Bill Burr on The View, what a constellation of intellect, saying that he's very angry about who's running the country. They're a bunch of nerds who don't know how to talk to girls. I mean, Elon Musk is definitely a nerd. Also, Elon Musk has like 1,000 children. So I'm pretty sure he knows how to at least talk to girls. Nerds who don't know how to talk to. I'm going to get lectured by Bill Burr on this. Okay, here we go.
The nerds that own the politician, all these tech nerds that want to build robots because they don't know how to talk to hot women, they're gonna take over the world. They're going to take over. They are literally going to replace us. We're like beta right now, and they're coming out with like the VCR. And I think Elon has got the rockets going because they realize there's other Earths out there. Yeah. And they're gonna trash this one, and because they don't have any concern for it, and they're gonna move on to the next Earth.
Just psychotic stuff. And again, I point out Bill Burr because he's the same person who literally cheers Luigi Mangione, which is an act of evil. Cheering on murder is a bad thing to do. Cold-blooded murder. I mean, he is called essentially for the murder of billionaires, Bill Burr, a man who makes his living by saying marginally funny things in front of crowds. And again, I say marginally funny because I watched him perform live, and he wasn't even funny enough to keep the crowd in their seats. It is truly amazing to watch how the left is swinging even further left. The far left has decided that resistance must eventually shade into Baader-Meinhof excuses for domestic terrorism and violence. It really is an amazing, amazing thing. And again, Hollywood leads the way in all this. John Cusack, who again is particularly irrelevant at this point, except that he appears on sort of activist phone calls. Apparently, there was something called a Tesla takedown mass call. It is amazing. They don't have the ability to win electorally, so they are going to wreck the largest electric vehicle company on planet Earth, all of these environmental nut jobs. I get the impression that their priority is not the environment, that it actually is something far grimmer. Here is John Cusack, who was last relevant 15 years ago.
Musk is kind of this arch villain of late stage capitalism, and he seems like this clown and this buffoon. But like Alex said, you know, this is a man who made a Sieg Heil Nazi salute, not only in public, but at a presidential victory party. It's good to remember that these are unprecedented times of mass criminality going on in the United States right now. And that, like Trump, Musk is a pathological liar. He's a criminal. He's a sociopath and a ghoul. And I mean those terms very precisely, because who else would use his own child as a sympathy prop while literally taking starving aid away from people all over the world?
Yeah, I'm glad that he was using the term ghoul so precisely. If he had not been using it with exactitude, I would have been a little bit upset. Also, I love him calling out Elon Musk as some sort of anti-Semite, throwing up Hitler salutes. John Cusack is pretty famously totally fine with anti-Semitism. So much so that the ADL, which is a left-wing organization, slaps John Cusack fairly regularly for it. John Cusack hasn't excited anybody in a movie for years, but starting a business is exciting. The financial chaos that comes with it, not so much. When I launched The Daily Wire, I became very familiar with compiling a sea of receipts, trying to track employee expenses, spending countless hours reconciling statements. It was a nightmare until we got it all figured out, which is why I want to introduce you to Ramp. Ramp is a free corporate card that automates your entire tedious and time-consuming expense process. Most finance teams are trapped, spending about 80% of their time on tactical busy work like chasing expenses and reconciling statements, with only 20% left for strategic thinking. Ramp flips this equation entirely. Their corporate card automates operations, freeing you and your finance team to focus on those strategies that truly drive growth. It's very difficult to think ahead when you're just trying to stay apace on the treadmill that is business. Ramp allows you to do that because it takes care of the treadmill part of the business. It's no wonder over 25,000 businesses trust Ramp, including Shopify and the Boys and Girls Club of America, which is why they were just named #1 in spend management by G2. Plus, switching on over to Ramp is easy. For new members, Ramp offers a complimentary white glove onboarding service to help you migrate from your current corporate card to start using Ramp. And now, for a limited time, listeners of this show can get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/Shapiro. That's ramp.com/Shapiro. ramp.com/Shapiro. Cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett, who's attempting to drink Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's milkshake as the most viral left-wing congressional star, she was also on this Tesla takedown mask. And notice where they are directing their energies. Notice where they're directing they're not directing their energies toward the actual elected officials. Like, there's a congressional election next year. They could be directing their energies at Congress, but they're losing because it turns out the Democratic Party is deeply unpopular. They could be directing all of their energies at President Trump, but they know they're getting nowhere with that. So instead, they've decided they're going to attack the private company of a private individual. Now, obviously, I don't mean that Musk isn't a public figure. He certainly is. And Tesla is publicly traded. But none of this has to do with government interventionism. Typically, in a republic, the way that you change policy is through your vote. Even when you're lobbying, the threat is to change votes. The threat is that you're going to do something that is going to change the nature of the electorate, which will then change the nature of the people who are governing you. But that's not what these people are doing. They're literally attempting to pressure a private company so as to pressure the owner of that private company into doing something that they would prefer he not do. It's an amazing thing. Here's Jasmine Crockett, U.S. representative. I mean, again, these are members of Congress who are actively attempting to foment some of the worst action against an electric vehicle company.
I'm going to keep screaming in the halls of Congress. I just need y'all to make sure that y'all keep screaming in the streets. I am truly here for very selfish reasons. Starting with on March 29th, it's my birthday. And all I want to see happen on my birthday is for Elon to be taken down. Yes.
That's all she wants on her birthday, is see Elon taken down. These people there's something sick about this. Truly, truly sick. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer is admitting that all these activists who you're seeing showing up at Republican town halls and screaming at Republican Congress people, basically Democrats are astroturfing this. That this is not a natural thing. That when you're having Harriet Hageman, who is a congresswoman from Wyoming is like 110% Republican, being berated at a congressional town hall, that is not the natural state of things.
We are mobilizing in New York. We have people going to the Republican districts and going after these Republicans who are voting for this and forcing them to either change their vote or face the consequences.
Well, I mean, at least you know what they're doing and who's astroturfing it. Meanwhile, again, this is spreading beyond its kind of normal boundaries into the realm of attacks by private citizens on other private citizens. According to Breitbart, a series of swatting incidents targeting conservative commentators and journalists have transpired nearly every evening since March 11th, according to X posts in which victims shared video surveillance footage and photos of the events, sparking questions as to who is engaging what Representative Andy Ogles of Tennessee called domestic terrorism and attempted murder. FBI Director Kash Patel, Attorney General Pam Bondi, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem have also reacted to the wave of dangerous crime. Swatting is where an anonymous person will call the cops and claim that there is a dangerous crime going on at some conservative's house. The police arrive ready to engage in some sort of battle with the person inside. And they'll say that a murder or a hostage event is taking place at the home. It's designed to prompt SWAT teams to arrive at the targeted home and then possibly do violence to the people inside. As Breitbart reports, at least 15 figures in conservative politics and media have reportedly been swatted within the course of 1 week. The string of swatting incidents seemingly began on the evening of March 11th, with InfoWars reporter Chase Geiser revealing in an early morning March 12th X-post that 6 to 8 police officers used a PA system to call me by name and order me to walk out of my house. And he is not, of course, the only one. Nick Sorter announced that his family was swatted. We have also seen Gunther Eagleman, who has 1.3 million followers on X, who is swatted. Right? This sort of stuff is really dangerous. And the fact that it is becoming more and more popular with the left to do this is a very bad sign for the country. Now, meanwhile, the media are trying to target Musk with anything they can. There's a story that the Trump administration is calling fake news about Elon Musk having a briefing at the Department of Defense today. According to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times also reported this. Musk was scheduled to receive a briefing Friday on the U.S. military's top secret war plans for China, according to 2 U.S. officials, giving the wealthy businessman and presidential advisor insight into one of the Pentagon's most closely guarded operational blueprints. Now, the reality is that Elon should not be in on that. He does not, in fact, have security clearance. Elon does enormous amounts of business with China. Right? Tesla does enormous business in China. And so the idea that America's confidential war plans should be put in front of a civilian without proper security clearance, that is a bad idea. Well, fortunately, according to the Trump administration, that was never going to happen. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed Musk was going to visit the Pentagon, but he disputed that he would receive a sensitive China briefing, saying, quote, "It's an informal meeting about innovation, efficiencies, and smarter production." President Trump put up a post on Truth Social Thursday evening saying China will not even be mentioned or discussed. So you now have a conflict between a media that has 2 confidential sources that they are not revealing, and openly members of the Trump administration saying that it is not true. Supposedly, according to the Wall Street Journal, Admiral Sam Papero, the head of the Indo-Pacific Command, said last month in remarks at a defense forum in Hawaii, the U.S. has war-winning advantages in possible conflict with China in both space and cyber capabilities, as well as a general advantage in submarines. Papero was expected to participate in a Musk briefing with Hegseth, Deputy Secretary of Defense Steve Feinberg, and Admiral Christopher Grady, who's vice chairman of the Joint Chief of Staffs. Now, it is quite possible that what this is actually about has nothing to do with confidential war plans. It's about weapon systems. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding, for example, the F-35, which is incredibly expensive to maintain. And there's great and open debate within the defense community about the efficacy of the F-35 for the future. Because as drone warfare becomes more and more plausible, should the United States be shifting its production into drones? This is something that Elon Musk has suggested. Musk recently made an unannounced visit to the NSA, which of course focuses on communication intercepts to discuss operations and staff reductions. But I think the idea that they were going to bring him in and then show him like the actual set of war plans, it seems like that is not true at all. But the media are jumping on anything involving Musk right now, which does show that they are very deeply afraid of what Musk is doing. And what is Musk doing at this point? What Musk is doing is firing a lot of people. And he's not actually doing the firing. He's advising the Trump administration whom to fire. He's also acting as a sort of public relations shield for the Trump administration because everybody can hate on Musk, but he's an unelected official. So there's nothing for them to really do about it. In reality, if you're mad at Trump, you should be mad at Trump. If you don't like that Musk is doing what he's doing, you should be angry at Trump if you're on the left, not at Musk. Musk is just the messenger. He's the outside consultant who's been called in. If you don't like the firings, that responsibility does not lie directly with Elon Musk. That responsibility lies elsewhere. But for the left, it is indicative of where the left's mindset is. The problem, shockingly, is never the government. It really is an amazing thing. I'm old enough to remember the Occupy Wall Street movement. So back during the recession of 2007, stretching all the way through 2009, during that recession, two sort of groups sprang up. And they were making similar cases from different angles. One was the Tea Party. I was a charter member of the Tea Party. You didn't actually have a membership card or anything, but basically the Tea Party was about reducing government spending. The idea was that the government's intervention in the economy had led to the real estate recession and general recession in the United States. And so the Tea Party focused its efforts on lobbying the government, on saying the government should cut. The government should restructure itself. The government should get less involved in the markets, which makes sense because if you're going to lobby somebody, lobby the government. Occupy Wall Street, as the name would suggest, did not occupy Washington, D.C. They occupied Wall Street, which was not answerable to them in any way. And it basically ended up being a bunch of anarchists and fellow travelers who pitched tents, not near houses of government, but near great centers of finance and industry, because the private sector had to be to blame. The public sector was never to blame. And you can see that in the hatred of Tesla. Tesla has literally nothing to do with what Elon Musk is doing at Doge. Joining us online is Mary Margaret Olohan, Daily Wire White House correspondent. A lot going on at the White House. Mary Margaret had the opportunity to ask questions again this week of Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, particularly with regard to Doge. So, Mary Margaret, let me ask you about that. You had a report earlier this week about a bizarre standoff at the U.S. Institute of Peace. What exactly happened? What did the White House have to say about it?
Well, good morning, Ben, from the White House. It's great to be here. This was an extraordinary story that we reported on. I'm not sure if I've seen something like this before. So the United States Institute of Peace, it's down on the other side of Washington, D.C. It's a massive institution, which is congressionally funded. But unfortunately, when Doge went in and told them that they needed to allow the new president of the organization to take over, they would not, in fact, do this. And so what sources have told us and what we reported on, and the White House has also further clarified on, is that when the new president of USIP, the United States Institute of Peace, went to take over and to enter the building, the old president, George Moose, would not, in fact, let him in. And this turned into a kind of bizarre standoff, not something you see in D.C. every day, where security, the Metropolitan Police Department, the FBI, were all involved in trying to let the new leader of this organization into the building, while the old leader had himself barricaded upstairs in his office. And it was more than that, Ben, actually. They were distributing pictures of the Doge employees, of the new leader of USIP, to show the people inside the building who not to allow into the building. They were also, when the new leadership was finally able to enter the building on Monday evening, they found that the elevators were not working, the internet was down, the telephones were not working, there was white noise on the top floor where the executive suite was, and they found that all the shades were drawn. So just lots of confusingly suspicious behavior, and I'm told that there's investigations into what was going on there, but the old leadership of USIP filed a lawsuit trying to say that Doge should not have been able to enter, that Doge illegally entered. And a judge ruled earlier this week that no, Doge could enter because the old leadership had been removed and the new leadership should have been allowed into the building. However, that judge did say that he was confused, or she was confused, by why Doge had behaved in this manner and kind of rebuked Doge for going into the building in this way. Now, the White House is saying they should have been able to do this because the old president had been removed. And when I asked Caroline Leavitt about this during the briefing, she suggested that this was just an example of how bureaucrats are resisting change to the Trump administration, and why this is one of the reasons that the Trump administration is so excited about Doge coming in and effectively cleaning house, removing bureaucrats who don't want to serve the American people.
Now, Mary Margaret, one of the things that's become quite apparent is that the hatred for the Trump administration is now being telescoped into hatred for Elon Musk personally. It's pretty clear it's a public relations ploy that's being done by the Democratic Party and members of the media. They can't actually challenge many of the things that Doge is doing on a sort of populist basis because most people actually want waste, fraud, and abuse cut. And so they've decided they're going to go after Elon personally. What's the feeling in sort of the White House about Elon at this moment?
Well, what you're hearing from both sides is that the White House is really excited by what Doge has been doing, by what Elon Musk has been doing. They want to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. And they're both horrified by the attacks on Tesla owners or by the attacks on Elon Musk. And I would say a little amused by the outrage that Elon is drawing. You know, for years, Trump and his campaign are used to the outrage that their efforts to change the United States have caused. You know, Trump has really drawn a lot of outrage since he first came down that escalator many years ago. But now a lot of that ire is being directed at Elon. And that's very interesting because Trump's support from the American people is just only rising right now. You know, more and more we're finding that most Americans are supporting Trump's efforts. Most Americans do support Elon as well, but I think a lot of Democrats are really focusing their ire on Elon rather than Trump, understanding that the president is very popular right now and his efforts are popular. So Elon might be the easier scapegoat.
Well, it's Mary Margaret Olohan. She, of course, is our White House senior correspondent. Mary Margaret, thanks so much for covering it, and good to see you again.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Tesla, again, is a private company. Tesla is a company that sells cars and develops AI technology. What does protesting Tesla have to do with protesting what the federal government is doing in terms of cuts? Even if you don't like Musk, shouldn't you be going after Musk in his pseudo-governmental capacity as opposed to in his private capacity as an owner of a business? Why does hitting the business matter? Why is that? And the answer is because for the left, the government is never to blame. You just switch to the people at the top of the government. The government must be maintained at all costs, even if that means you focus your ire on Tesla and not on the actual people in the government who are actively currently doing the kinds of firings that you're very angry about. Speaking of which, President Trump is moving forward to try and dismantle the Department of Education. This is a 4-decade-long promise from Republicans that they are going to dismantle the Department of Education, which, of course, performs functions that should be performed not at the federal governmental level, but should be performed at the state level. Here is President Trump signing an executive order directed at abolishing the Department of Education yesterday. There is President Trump signing the actual document with the marker.
Okay.
The president then made remarks about all of this. He was talking about Linda McMahon, who is his Secretary of Education, and he says that he is interested in her being the last Secretary of Education.
And we're pleased to be joined today by the woman who I chose because she's an extraordinary person, and hopefully she will be our last Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. Linda, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, by the way, worth noting here that everybody is yelling at Trump about that. How could they're going to dismantle the Department of Education? They can't do that. It is an established department by Congress. He's not going to dismantle the Department of Education outright. He's going to reduce the size and the scope of it, and then he's going to wait for Congress to do it. This is made clear by Caroline Leavitt over at the White House yesterday.
So the Department of Education will be much smaller than it is today. As you know, the president's executive order directed Linda McMahon to greatly minimize the agency. So when it comes to student loans and Pell Grants, those will still be run out of the Department of Education. But we don't need to be spending more than $3 trillion over the course of a few decades on a department that's clearly failing in its initial intention to educate our students.
By the way, that's inarguable. Educational performance in the United States has sunk over the course of the existence of the Department of Education. And when it comes to American educational performance, sort of like America's performance in the war on poverty, the question isn't, did America get worse at education over the past few decades? The question is whether we got better after injecting trillions of dollars into the system. So if the war on poverty took $22 trillion to reach the same point that we had before, that would be a failure. And if you have a Department of Education that spends trillions of dollars and achieves basically nothing, that would also be a failure. So I asked Perplexity, one of our sponsors, quote, has American educational performance versus the rest of the world declined since the creation of the Department of Education? And Perplexity answered, American educational performance relative to other countries has not significantly declined since the creation of the Department of Education in 1979. While the U.S. does face challenges in some areas, particularly in mathematics, the overall trend shows mixed results rather than a clear decline. But what does that actually mean? When it comes to the Program for International Student Assessment, in 2022, U.S. students ranked 21st in math, 5th in reading, and tied for 10th in science among OECD countries. When it comes to the trends in international mathematics and science study, in 2019, the U.S. had higher average scores than most participating countries in both math and science at 4th and 8th grade levels, but higher than most. We also spend virtually more than anybody. The U.S. ranked 8th out of 41 countries in educational attainment, with 92% of adults aged 25 to 64 holding at least a high school diploma. But that particular measure is also not a great measure because a lot of people in the United States are elevated through high school without ever learning anything, which is why you have to have remedial courses in college. One of the things that tends to happen when it comes to analyzing educational performance is people saying, look how many people have college degrees, rather than have the degrees been watered down such that a college degree is now worth what a high school degree used to be worth, or a high school degree is now worth what a junior high degree used to be worth. The bottom line is we've expended trillions of dollars over time via the federal government and very little to show for it. Well, meanwhile, after more than a year of war, terror, and pain in Israel, the need for security essentials and support for first responders remains critical. Even during periods of supposed ceasefire, Israel must maintain constant vigilance and preparedness for potential threats that could emerge from literally any direction. Throughout this challenging time, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews has stood firmly alongside the people of Israel, providing essential security resources that save lives. We remain committed to this vital mission. Your gift today will directly contribute to life-saving security measures, including bomb shelters to protect families during rocket attacks, armored security vehicles, ambulances that provide critical medical care, advanced firefighting equipment for emergency response teams, protective gear like flak jackets and bulletproof vests for those on the front lines, and numerous other crucial resources. By making a generous donation today, you're helping ensure that Israel's communities remain safe and secure during these uncertain times, allowing families to live with greater peace of mind in the days ahead. Make your life-saving gift to bless Israel and her people by visiting benforthefellowship.org. Again, that's benforthefellowship.org. They're doing amazing work on the ground in the Holy Land. Go check them out right now. benforthefellowship.org. Thank you, and God bless. Also, to help us feel energized and balanced, my team and I, we've been partnering with Live Good My assistant Kelly recently tried their Bioactive Complete multivitamin as well as the Organic Complete plant-based protein powder because this year she wants to stay on top of the health and the wellness. Since taking them and getting all the nutrients, vitamins, and minerals your body typically needs, she's noticed a big difference in overall health and strengthened immune response even with all the bugs that have been going around recently. And the protein powder is so convenient for throwing in smoothies after gym recovery as well. Live Good delivers expert formulated premium supplements at unbeatable prices by eliminating middlemen and excessive markups. It's no surprise they've become the fastest growing supplement brand with over 1.5 million satisfied customers. Plus, all their products fit conveniently into your day. Kelly takes their multivitamin after breakfast. She throws some of the protein powder into smoothies after workouts, and she says she's noticed just how much more energy and focus she has throughout the day compared to before she added those Live Good products into her routine. If you're ready to make the switch and start saving, we'll make it even easier for you. Use our link. You can save an additional 10% off your first order on top of already low prices. Just go to livegood.com/Ben to save 10% on that first order. That's livegood.com/Ben. Don't miss out on this opportunity to invest in your health without overspending. The actual executive order, by the way, does not actually close the Department of Education. It says that it should close, but it doesn't close it because Trump doesn't have the power to do that. The actual text of the executive order says, quote, closing the Department of Education would provide children and their families the opportunity to escape a system that is failing them. Today, American reading and math scores are near historical lows. This year's National Assessment of Educational Progress showed that 70% of eighth graders were below proficient in reading and 72% were below proficient in math. The federal education bureaucracy is not working. Closure of the Department of Education would drastically improve program implementation in higher education. The Department of Education currently manages a student loan debt portfolio of more than $1.6 trillion. This means the federal student aid program is roughly the size of one of the nation's largest banks, Wells Fargo. But although Wells Fargo has more than 200,000 employees, the Department of Education has fewer than 1,500 in its Office of Federal Student Aid. The Department of Education is not a bank. It must return bank functions to an entity equipped to serve America's students. Ultimately, the Department of Education's main functions can and should be returned to the state. And then the actual executive order says, quote, the Secretary of Education shall, to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education and return authority over education to the states. Now, again, consistent with the provisions of law. Yeah, that's all. So he's saying we should move toward that. We can't actually do it without some sort of congressional intervention, but we are going to move toward that. And this, by the way, is a broad spectrum popular conservative policy. Chris Sununu, who is the former governor of New Hampshire and very popular in the state and certainly not a radically conservative Republican, talked on CNN about why conservatives have been focused on closing the DOE.
What value add does the federal Department of Education bring when you return power to states? And as a governor, I can tell you that's very important. And it's not just the money, it's the control, how those dollars are spent. All the red tape that comes with the federal Department of Education when it comes to special ed, school choice, homeschooling, charter schools, whatever it might be. Let states have those options. Look, I might disagree. I'll use an extreme example. I might disagree with Gavin Newsom in California on a lot of things.
What?
But believe me, California knows what their students need a heck of a lot better than a bunch of bureaucrats in Washington. So and this isn't just a MAGA idea, guys. This is empowering parents, teachers, that better communication at the local level, driving curriculum at a localized level for the needs of that community.
Yeah, he is right about all of that. And again, what President Trump is doing here, this is the thing the left cannot deal with, is actually popular. Many of the things he's doing, these cuts, examining for waste, fraud, and abuse, Doge remains a popular idea, which is why the left is fulminating against Musk. They're trying to personalize the politics here. It's about Musk. It's not about what he's trying to do, which, of course, is doomed to failure. But the good news is that Democrats do have a bunch of federal judges on their side. According to Politico, yesterday, a federal judge barred Elon Musk's Doge from accessing sensitive information at the Social Security Administration, saying the group appears to be on a fishing expedition that could jeopardize the data of millions of people. The Doge team is essentially engaged in a fishing expedition at SSA in search of a fraud epidemic based on little more than suspicion, said U.S. District Judge Ellen Hollander in a 137-page ruling. It has launched a search for the proverbial needle in the haystack without any concrete knowledge that the needle is actually in the haystack. That is a terrible analogy, truly a terrible analogy. First of all, we know that there are people who are using false social security numbers in the United States. That is a very real thing. Illegal immigrants in particular have spent decades obtaining false social security numbers and then receiving aid or employment based on those false social security numbers. But beyond that, that is really stupid. If you're auditing a government department and the argument is you can't audit the government department because you don't know if there's anything wrong, that's literally the purpose of an audit. That's why an audit exists, is to determine if there is something wrong. Honest to God, that's like suggesting that police should never, ever be able to serve a search warrant because they don't know for sure what's inside the house before they actually search the house. Yeah, that's the point of the search warrant. That's the whole idea. Hollander, of course, a Barack Obama appointee, said the group's broad access likely violated privacy laws, and then ordered an immediate halt to the Doge Social Security team's access to any systems that contain sensitive data of Social Security recipients. The judge wrote, ironically, the identity of these Doge affiliates has been concealed because defendants are concerned the disclosure of even their names would expose them to harassment and thus invade their privacy. The defense does not appear to share a privacy concern for the millions of Americans whose SSA records were made available to Doge affiliates without their consent. Well, hold up. That is not the same thing at all. The people who are working for Doge are properly concerned based on the fact that, the left is burning cars and doxing people and swatting their homes. That maybe the revelation of their names would be a problem for their safety. Who thinks it's a problem for their safety if the Doge team looks at a list of Social Security numbers and tries to match it up with, say, birth records? And what exactly is the problem here? But this is part and parcel of a broader judicial attempt by Barack Obama appointees, in large part, Clinton appointees too, Biden appointees, to undercut the functioning of the executive branch, the judiciary, saying that basically Trump can't do what he needs to do because the judiciary says no. And it's all exaggerated and ridiculous. Vice President Vance is correct on this. He was talking about judicial overreach yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
You can't have a judge who's controlling troop deployments. You can't have a judge who's controlling how we enforce our immigration laws. The American people actually invested the President of the United States with some of these core law enforcement authorities, and the President has to be able to do the job the American people elected him to do. I think what you're seeing really is judicial overreach on a scale we've never seen in the history of this country, and I think the Supreme Court has got to put a stop to it.
I mean, he's right about that. By the way, JD went to Yale Law School, so it's not like JD has no background in any of this sort of stuff. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer, who was perfectly willing to buck the Constitution on behalf of both Barack Obama and Joe Biden routinely, he says that the United States is now in a constitutional crisis. Now, why? Seriously, why? What is the constitutional crisis that he mentions? The administration has no intention of bucking Supreme Court orders, the way, say, Joe Biden did. They have no intention of doing that. What they are saying is a district court judge should not have the ability to issue nationwide injunctions on national policy before the Supreme Court has weighed in. And again, the Supreme Court needs to take this up. They do. The Supreme Court rejected taking this up just a few months ago and reverted it back to district court level. They need to take up the question of what exactly is the jurisdiction of a temporary restraining order issued by a district court judge, because it is wrecking the system. It is a real problem. Overreaching judges can, in fact, wreck systems. By the way, you see this abroad all the time. You see it in Brazil. You're seeing it in Israel right now. You've seen it in South Korea. Like the overreach by a judiciary into the realm of what the legislature or what the executive does is just as much of a damage as the executive branch reaching into the functions of the judiciary or the legislature, or a legislative branch reaching into the functions of the executive or the judiciary. This kind of notion of a completely unfettered judiciary that can simply encroach upon the prerogatives of the other branch is a complete violation of what the founders meant to do. That's the constitutional crisis. Now, here's Chuck Schumer making the case that the Trump administration not waiting around on every district court judge in America to sign off on their action, but instead wanting the Supreme Court to sign off on it, is somehow a violation of the Constitution.
Democracy is at risk. Look, Donald Trump is a lawless, angry man. He thinks he should be king. He thinks he should do whatever he wants, regardless of the law. And he thinks judges should just listen to him.
He thinks judges should just, so did Barack Obama. Barack Obama so much thought that judges should listen to him that he literally ripped the Supreme Court in front of the Supreme Court, leading Justice Samuel Alito to shake his head mildly and create an entire news cycle about how the Supreme Court justice had been disrespectful to Barack Obama. Again, remember, for the press, if the Supreme Court does not rule the way Democrats like, the Supreme Court is the threat to the Republic. If the Supreme Court rules against a Republican and the Republican says, I don't like it, that's a threat to the Republic. It's all about power. It is never, ever about principle. Now, again, I don't think that the Trump administration is dumb enough to start defying Supreme Court orders. And in fact, they've said repeatedly they are not. It would, in fact, be a foolish move to start defying Supreme Court orders. And this is what every poll finds. Here's Harry Ensign explaining.
The American people do not want Trump to defy court rulings, all right? You rarely see numbers like this. Should Trump follow court rulings? Look at this. 84% of all adults, that's near uniformity in this day and age. You rarely ever see 92% of Democrats, 82% of independents, 79% of Republicans agree on anything. but they do agree on this. They may disagree over Donald Trump, but they all agree that he must follow court rulings. To cross that Rubicon is a big no-no in the eyes of the American public.
Okay, but the American public is not really talking there about like a lower district court judge who puts a temporary restraining order and then that temporary restraining order doesn't hold. They're talking about the Supreme Court says, for example, that student loans cannot simply be relieved by dint of executive action. And then Joe Biden does that. That's what the American public mean. Now, meanwhile, the leftist agenda here suggests, of course, that everything is a danger to the republic, including, by the way, the idea that if you deport Hamas supporters, somehow this is a danger to American citizens. So Mehdi Hasan, who is an American, I mean, I understand why he's upset. Mehdi Hasan is pretty warm toward terrorism and also became an American citizen in 2020. But no one can deport Mehdi Hasan, and no one's calling for the deportation of Mehdi Hasan. But here he was claiming that the threat is to American citizens if, you know, a person on a student visa or a work visa goes to a Hezbollah funeral. Here's Mehdi Hasan being Mehdi Hasan. Again, the horseshoe theory here is so strong. Here he is with Rick Wilson of the Lincoln Project. Mehdi Hasan crossing streams with Tucker Carlson these days. And the horseshoe theory of politics is quite a real thing.
We are in a very dark place because if you accept the argument from the Trump administration that there's no due process for people, then what is to stop them from going after citizens and green card holders and political enemies? Because by definition, all we have is their say-so. And the United States of America's entire constitutional system was built on the basis that you don't just take the president's say-so for something.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering, what is the due process that has been denied to citizens and political enemies? Can he name it? Truly, can you name it? And the answer is no. That is a large jump. That is a very, very large scale jump. Even the people that he's talking about, for example, this green card holder who is going to be deported for being a Hamasnik, that guy's getting due process. Literally, his case is in the process of appeal right now in front of the judiciary. And meanwhile, the battle on the left continues between the kind of insane and the people who are more moderate. The insane are likely to win that battle. On the side of the more moderate are people like James Carville, who keeps pointing out, why is it that the Democratic Party has abandoned the traditional sort of Clintonian blue dog Democrat audience?
You know, the stupidity of we got to be the most progressive, self-righteous, moralistic people in the world. And, you know, people who live in rural America are just, you know, fat, lazy, and stupid, which is decidedly not true. But that's the way that some of the urbanist elements of our party have tried to come across. Yeah. And it's stupid, and they ought to apologize to the world for being so stupid.
And again, Carville is not wrong about this sort of stuff. But Democrats are not going to listen to him. And the reason they're not going to listen to him is because they actually do not like non-college educated white men. This is a very big problem for the Democrats. They do not like a constituency that they actually need to win a larger share of. And you can see it in the polling. Right now, the Democratic Party is run almost entirely by college-educated white ladies. That is what the Democratic Party is. It is run by college-educated white ladies who are disproportionately unmarried. This is evident from the polling from NBC News earlier this week, for example. Steve Kornacki says, when it comes to positive or negative views of Trump, among all voters, 46% positive, 49% negative. Among white voters, Trump is 52-45, 52% positive. 69% of white men without degrees view Trump positively. Only 28% see him negatively. Among white women with degrees, it is 29% positive and 67% negative. That is a net negative of 38 points. That is a 79-point net rating gap between the two groups. Those splits are absolutely enormous. And by the way, it does not include white non-college educated women. White women with no degree, for example, are plus 14 on Donald Trump. They are negative 38 on Donald Trump if you're a white college-educated woman. If you're a white college-educated man, you're plus 1 on Trump. If you're a white man with no degree, you're plus 41 on Donald Trump. The gigantic outlier is not educational, it is educational and also sex-based. White college-educated women are enormously woke. Take, for example, the issue of DEI. So in this NBC News poll, what it shows is that on DEI, white men with no college degree, negative 40 on DEI. White men with a college degree, negative 17 on DEI. White women, no degree, negative 1 on DEI. White women, college degree, plus 31 on DEI. Plus 31. It is truly, what a complete disaster area for the Democratic Party. They are They are holding to a one slice of the electorate, and they're holding on to it tighter and tighter and letting it define them. This is why you end up with the popularity of people like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. Because Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is appealing to one group of women, white college-educated ladies overall. That is really her subgroup. Those are the people who want these sort of resistance nonsense. Here she was just a couple of days ago saying that Americans, the Republicans, have disdain for working people because they make fun of her being a bartender. Well, yeah, we make fun of you being a bartender because you have not shown that you are qualified to be a useful person in the halls of Congress. And by the way, cosplaying as a blue-collar working woman while earning a pretty good salary to live in a really nice Georgetown apartment, it doesn't play anymore.
But I want you to understand that she isn't just talking about me here. She's talking about you. She's talking about all of us. Because the entire job of the president's lawyer is to speak for him. Trump hired her to speak for him. So imagine what it means for our country that the president's own lawyer cannot even conceive of a working class person being intelligent simply because of the job that they have.
Ridiculous. Let's be clear. Trump voters are much warmer toward your normal bartender than Democrats. Truly, like across the country. The Democrats are exactly the sort of people who believe that a degree in gender studies from Wellesley qualifies you for higher office. Alyssa Slotkin, who is the senator from Michigan, who's attempting to do the James Carville routine, she actually spent yesterday slamming AOC and Bernie Sanders and said, what the hell do you guys do for a living? You're useless.
All of those things require me to be more than just an AOC. I can't do what she does because we live in a purple state and I'm a pragmatist. Everyone you mentioned has a lot of words, but what have they actually done to change the situation with Donald Trump?
And Senator Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan, and she, of course, is right. Ripping on Bernie and ripping on AOC, they haven't done anything. But that is going to be their entire pitch going forward for the Democratic Party. We weren't involved in the system. They are a danger to the Democratic Party. Now, the real danger is that, God forbid, Bernie Sanders and AOC start to gain credibility if there's an economic downturn. I've said this 1,000 times. I will continue to say it. Bad economic policy is the greatest threat to the Trump administration. There's a bunch of good economic policy that they are currently doing, ranging from deregulation to presumably enshrining tax cuts permanently. The current tax rates should be maintained. All of that would be really, really good. But the markets are still quite nervous about the possibility of a major hike in tariffs come April 2nd. The Dow Jones is bouncing around a lot. It was up yesterday. It's down today. There's just a lot of turmoil in markets and a lot of lack of faith right now in what the markets are going to do. There's a reason for that. The Federal Reserve set out its projections yesterday. And what they suggested is that the president's tariff plans are likely to subdue the strength of the economy. Policymakers had presumed that they would spend 2025 gradually cutting rates to keep inflation heading down without a big rise in joblessness, according to the Wall Street Journal. The latest projections point to the prospect that tariffs covering a swath of goods and materials will actually send prices up while sapping investment, sentiment, and growth in the short term. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said, we now have inflation coming in from an exogenous source. The underlying inflationary picture before that was basically 2.5% inflation, 2% growth, and 4% unemployment. Now, officials are projecting weaker growth, higher unemployment, and higher inflation. President Trump continues to push forward with the idea that there should be both tariffs and rate cuts, which is not a thing that's going to happen. He put out a statement on Wednesday saying, quote, the Fed would be much better off cutting rates as U.S. tariffs start to transition and ease their ways into the economy. Do the right thing. But cutting rates in the middle of inflation that is still 50% too high while tariffs are increasing prices would actually not be the world's best move. The truth is that if you want to wipe inflation completely out, the Fed made a mistake last year by artificially lowering those interest rates. They should have actually kept the interest rates where they were and let the inflation peter out in the economy. Now, there is some good news. Again, the economy is ready to go in a lot of ways. For example, existing home sales rose 4.2% in February from the month prior to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 4.26 million, according to the National Association of Realtors, which was far better than expectations. I think one of the reasons for that probably is that there are a lot of people who are now running out of cash, and now they are going to have to try and sell their houses, and they figure that the interest rates on mortgages are not going to drop dramatically anytime in the near future. And so they're basically giving up, and now they're selling their houses, so there's more inventory, so people are buying those houses. However, there are people who are, in fact, capable of buying those houses. So you are seeing some action in the real estate markets. Weirdly enough, that action in the real estate markets might actually lead to prices going down as supply increases to meet demand. Now, the Trump administration's number one goal at this point has to be a booming economy. All the other stuff is secondary. All right, folks, it is a Friday, so it's time for a cultural recommendation. So I have recommended the show Severance on Apple TV before. It is great. It is a truly terrific show. It's fascinating. It's interesting. It raises really interesting philosophical questions about identity, work-life balance, relationships. It really is a fascinating show. So the season finale is out on Friday. I had a chance to watch it. And I will say, again, really well-constructed show. It is doing the thing that Lost never did, which is answer the questions that it actually poses, which is wonderful. So I was a huge Lost fan. For people who remember back to 2007, 2008, Lost was a huge show on ABC. A fascinating show that posited a bunch of mysteries and then refused to answer any of them and suggested you were an idiot if you wanted to know the answers, which is why Damon Lindelof, who wrote the show, is a schmuck. I'm still angry at Damon Lindelof. Here's an entire show filled with interesting mysteries, and you have faith in the writers are going to solve them. And then he says at the end of the show that if you want those mysteries answered, well, you're just not mature. So, well, then don't pose the mystery. I get it. Life is a mystery, but TV ought not be. So Severance is doing the opposite. Severance sets up a bunch of mysteries, and then it actually starts solving those mysteries. So for those who haven't watched Severance, there will be spoilers. The setup for Severance is essentially that there is a process that has been invented by a company called Lumen Industries. And Lumen Industries has made it so that you can sever your brain in such a way that your work life is completely separate from the rest of your life. So you lead your life and then you get in an elevator, and as you go down the elevator, your brain actually changes. When you get off the elevator in your workplace, you don't know who you are, you don't know where you are, you just have your work life. And the purpose of this would be that when you get home, you're not thinking about work. And when you're at work, you're not thinking about home. And so it's for people who have trauma and they're trying to dissociate from that trauma and all of the rest. And so immediately you've set up some interesting sort of spiritual and identity-based conundrums. Like, for example, if you have a completely separate identity when you go to your work life, a completely separate love life, because you might fall in love with a coworker because you don't even remember that you have a wife upstairs, for example. If you do that, is that a separate human? And if that person goes away, did you just kill a person? Right? It's these sorts of questions that Severance is asking. What is the nature of identity? Is there a common thread between the different parts of your identity that holds them together? And it's wrapped into a really compelling plot with really likable and interesting characters and terrific writing. It's super weird and super interesting. So in the season 2 finale, the setup is that the main character, played by Adam Scott, is Mark Scout. When he goes into his innie world, which is sort of the employment world, then he's known as Mark S. And he falls in love in the innie world with a woman who is not his wife. His wife supposedly died, but actually has been taken prisoner by Lumen and is being used in experiments, as it turns out. And he doesn't realize when he's in the innie world that he actually has a wife. So he falls in love with a coworker who, it turns out, is working for the company in her outie life. Right? If the outie life is what's happening outside the workplace, the innie life is what's happening inside the workplace. And so Mark S. finally breaks the barrier. The course of season 2 is about him sort of introducing his innie to his outie and trying to find what is the connection between them and what their various interests are. Because it turns out that Mark Scout's wife is alive, and so his interest is in getting his innie to go and free his wife, and then for him to basically turn back into Mark Scout as opposed to his innie, and then he and his wife can be together. And meanwhile, the innie is saying, well, I have my own separate life down here. And sure, it's kind of hellish because we live in this cubicled office space, but I have a love life, I have somebody I love, I have friends, so you're asking me to give up my life to you. And so that's the central conflict of season 2. It's really well thought out. The characters are really fascinating, all the way down to the certain characters who are sort of the indoctrinated parts of the Egan Empire, which is Lumen Industries. Particularly the guy who plays Mr. Milchick is really a terrific actor. He's really great. It's a really well thought out show. The season finale really pays off. And again, I won't spoil it for those who haven't seen it because it's still pretty early. It only came out late Thursday night on Apple TV, so a lot of people are going to watch it tonight, presumably. I will say that it pays off. For those who've been watching, the show's great. More of this, more creative shows. And there's so many paint-by-numbers pieces of content right now. And good for Ben Stiller and for his team for putting together a piece of content that truly is interesting, asks cool questions, is well plotted, is well written, truly well acted. I think it's the best TV show of the last several years. I mean, minimum. By the time it's over, if it continues to operate at this level, it's going to be one of the top 5 TV shows of all time. It really is that good. Severance is terrific. If you haven't seen it, you should get into it today. I will admit that I watched the first season thinking my wife wouldn't like it. And then, like various travels last year. And then this year I said, season 2's coming out. Maybe we should go back and watch season 1. And after watching it, she's very angry at me that I didn't wait for her to watch season 1. And so now she's all caught up. It's great. Can't wait for season 3 on it. Alrighty, coming up, we'll get into some more cultural questions, including apparently LGBTQ plus minus divided by sign narratives on Assassin's Creed Shadows, a video game, and also images of the new Mattel doll have broken. We'll get to that momentarily. First, you do have to become a member. If you want to hear the rest of the show every single day, you do have to become a member here at Daily Wire Plus. And that means you get all sorts of stuff. You get Matt Walsh's amazing movies. Am I Racist? What is a Woman? All the background. You get All Access Live where you can hang out with me and Matt and Jordan and all the rest of the crew. Michael Knowles, all the rest of the crew. The only way you can watch all of this and the rest of my show is to join Daily Wire Plus. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.